My name is Veronica, 35, and I just made the worst mistake of any mother's life. I grew up with a mum who left when I was 10, creating wounds that never fully healed. Now I have a 14-year-old son, Jason, and a 12-year-old stepdaughter, Sophia. Somehow, without realizing it, I started favoring Sophia, while my own son faded into the background of our family picture. By the time I saw what was happening, it was too late. Before I tell you how I destroyed my relationship with my son, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you want to hear what I learned from creating the same cycle of abandonment I once suffered. I grew up in a small town in Ohio where everyone knew everyone. My childhood started normally enough with birthday parties, family dinners, and a mum who seemed to love being a mother. I remember her reading bedtime stories and making my favorite strawberry pancakes on Sunday mornings. Dad worked long hours at the local manufacturing plant, so Mum was my primary caregiver and the center of my world. Things began changing when I turned 8. Mum started getting quieter, spending more time alone in her bedroom. Her smiles became less frequent, and the pancake Sundays gradually disappeared. I would find her staring out windows with this faraway look in her eyes that scared me. When I asked what was wrong, she would snap out of it, plaster on a smile, and say everything was fine. But children know when adults are lying. I started trying harder to make her happy. I kept my room spotless, got perfect grades, and even learnt to make my own breakfast so she could sleep in. I thought if I was the perfect daughter, she would go back to being my old mum. I was too young to understand that her unhappiness had nothing to do with me. The day she left, I came home from school to find Dad sitting at the kitchen table, his eyes red and swollen. I knew something terrible had happened before he said a word. "Your mother is gone, Veronica," he said, his voice breaking. "She left a note saying she needs to find herself. She might not be coming back for a while." A while turned into forever. She never returned, not for my birthdays, graduations, or even when Dad had a heart attack when I was 16. The only communication was a Christmas card each year with no return address and a gift card to a department store. No personal message, no phone number. Just proof she was alive somewhere, living a life that didn't include me. Dad did his best, but he was broken too. He worked, came home, heated up frozen dinners, and asked about my homework. On weekends, he sat in front of the TV with a beer, staring blankly at whatever was on. Depression wrapped around him like a heavy blanket he couldn't shake off. I grew up fast, learning to do laundry, cook simple meals, and manage the household budget by 13. I became fiercely independent, telling myself I didn't need anyone. I built walls around my heart, determined never to be vulnerable to abandonment again. The message I internalized was crystal clear: if my own mother could leave me, anyone could. Love was dangerous. Needing people was a weakness. In high school, I avoided close friendships and focused on academics. Dating was a series of brief relationships that I ended at the first sign of getting too close. I kept people at arm's length, always ready for them to leave me first. When I got into state university with a scholarship, it felt like my ticket to freedom. College became about reinvention. I studied elementary education, drawn to the idea of being the supportive adult I wished I'd had. I graduated with honors, landed a teaching job at a good school district, and thought I had successfully overcome my past. Then I met Brian at 25. He was different from the men I usually dated. Patient, persistent, and seemingly unshakable in his pursuit. When I pulled away, he stayed. When I tested him with my worst behavior, he saw through my defenses. For the first time, I let someone past my walls. Our romance was a whirlwind. Within a year, we were married in a small ceremony with Dad giving me away. 2 years later, I was pregnant with Jason, and suddenly all my buried fears came roaring back. What if I was like her? What if motherhood triggered the same thing in me that had made my mother walk away? What if the capacity to abandon your child was genetic? When the nurse placed newborn Jason in my arms, I felt a love so fierce it terrified me. I promised him silently that I would never ever be like my mother. I would stay. I would love him unconditionally. I would be everything she failed to be. For the first few years, I thought I was keeping that promise. The early years with Jason were beautiful but exhausting. I threw myself into motherhood with the determination of someone with something to prove. I read every parenting book, joined mommy groups, and created elaborate photo albums documenting his every milestone. On the surface, I was the perfect mother, but underneath, anxiety was my constant companion. Each time Jason cried and I couldn't soothe him, each moment of frustration or exhaustion became evidence in my mind that perhaps I was defective after all. I would catch myself checking my emotions, searching for any sign that I was detaching, like my mother had. "You're doing great," Brian would assure me, finding me crying after Jason was asleep. "Babies are hard. It's normal to feel overwhelmed sometimes." But I didn't believe him. Normal mothers didn't have these fears. Normal mothers hadn't been abandoned. As Jason grew from baby to toddler, I relaxed somewhat. He was a sweet, curious child with Brian's blue eyes and my dark hair. He loved dinosaurs and could name all of them by 3. When he wrapped his arms around my neck and said, "I love you more than T-Rex loves meat," my heart would swell with joy. Meanwhile, Brian's career in finance was taking off. His long hours at the office left me handling most of the parenting responsibilities alone. At first, I managed well balancing teaching kindergarten with raising Jason, but as Brian's absences grew longer and more frequent, resentment began to simmer. "You said we were partners in this." I confronted him one night after he missed dinner again. Jason was 4 and had waited by the window for his daddy until bedtime. "I'm doing this for us," Brian argued, loosening his tie. "For our future. This promotion means we can buy a bigger house, take real vacations, save for Jason's college. Jason doesn't need a bigger house. He needs his father present." The arguments became more frequent. Brian started sleeping in the guest room. I noticed parallels between his emotional withdrawal and my mother's, which fueled my anxiety even more. History seemed to be repeating itself, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Then came the text message I wasn't meant to see. Brian had left his phone on the counter while showering. A notification appeared from someone named Allison. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Wear the blue shirt I like." My world imploded. The confrontation that followed revealed a 6-month affair with a co-worker. Brian didn't even try to deny it. "I'm unhappy, Veronica," he said, as if that explained everything. "You're always anxious, always questioning my commitment. It's exhausting living with someone waiting for you to fail." The divorce was bitter. Brian fought for joint custody, but the court favored me as the primary caregiver. Jason was 6, old enough to understand something terrible was happening, but too young to process it. The look on his face the first time he had to pack a weekend bag to visit his dad's new apartment haunts me still. "When am I coming home?" he asked, clutching his dinosaur backpack. "Sunday evening, buddy," I said, forcing a smile. "And we'll have pizza when you get back, okay?" His small shoulders slumped as he walked to Brian's car. I felt like I was failing him completely. In the aftermath, Jason changed. The bubbly, talkative child became quiet and watchful. He stopped sharing his thoughts freely. At school conferences, teachers mentioned he seemed distracted and withdrawn. I tried to draw him out, but found myself growing frustrated when he responded with shrugs or one-word answers. "Jason, please talk to me," I would plead. "I'm fine, he would mutter, retreating to his room. To cope with my own pain and the stress of single parenthood, I threw myself into work. I took on extra committees at school and started pursuing a master's degree in educational leadership. Keeping busy meant less time to feel the hurt or notice the parallels between my life and my mother's. Gradually, Jason and I fell into a routine that functioned but lacked the closeness we once shared. He went to school and his activities. I worked and studied. We existed in the same space without truly connecting. I told myself it was just a phase that he would open up again when the wound of the divorce healed. I didn't recognize that in my effort to protect myself from more pain, I was beginning to emotionally detach from Jason, just as my mother had done with me. The very thing I had feared most was happening, and I was completely blind to it. 3 years after my divorce from Brian, I attended a school fundraiser for the arts program. As the teacher representative, I was manning the ticket table when a tall man with kind eyes approached with a young girl at his side. "2 tickets, please," he said, smiling. "I hear the student artwork is exceptional this year." "It really is," I replied, returning his smile. "Your daughter's piece might be among them." "Sophia," he said, nodding toward the shy girl beside him. "She's in 3rd grade. Art is her favorite subject." "My dad says I'm going to be the next Frida Kahlo," the girl said, her eyes lighting up. "Well, Sophia, I can't wait to see your masterpiece then," I said. Something about her immediately drew me in. Perhaps it was the way she stood slightly behind her father, both eager and hesitant, reminding me of myself at that age. "I'm Michael, by the way," the man said, extending his hand. "Michael Davis. Sophia and I are still relatively new to the district." As we shook hands, I noticed he wasn't wearing a wedding ring. Before I could overthink it, another family approached the table, ending our conversation. Later, as I wandered through the exhibition, I found myself standing next to Michael again, both of us admiring a vibrant painting of a garden. "That's my daughter's," he said proudly. Sophia painted it to remember her mother's favourite place. The sadness in his voice made me turn toward him. "It's beautiful. She has real talent." "Her mother would have been so proud," he said quietly. "She was an artist too." "Was?" I asked gently. Michael nodded. "Cancer, 3 years ago. Sophia was 7. My heart ached for them both." "I'm so sorry." We ended up talking for nearly an hour that night. Michael was an architect who had moved to our town for a fresh start after his wife's death. Sophia had struggled with the loss unsurprisingly, and art had become her emotional outlet. When he asked for my number at the end of the evening, I surprised myself by giving it to him. There was something about Michael and Sophia that felt safe, perhaps because they understood loss too. Our first date was coffee on a Saturday afternoon, while Sophia had a play date and Jason was at Brian's. Michael was thoughtful, intelligent, and refreshingly direct about his life as a widowed father. "It's been hard," he admitted. "I worry constantly about Sophia growing up without her mother. There are so many things I don't know how to help her with." His vulnerability touched me. I found myself sharing things about my own mother's abandonment that I rarely discussed with anyone. He listened without judgment, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand when my voice faltered. Over the next few months, we began seeing each other regularly. When it came time to introduce our children to the relationship, I was nervous. Jason was 10 now, navigating that tricky space between childhood and adolescence. He had grown even more reserved over the years, especially around new people. The first meeting was awkward. Jason was polite but distant, answering Michael's friendly questions with minimal responses. Sophia, 8, and naturally outgoing, despite her loss, tried to engage him by showing him her art supplies. "Do you like to draw?" she asked eagerly. Jason shrugged. "Not really. I like soccer." "Oh," she looked disappointed briefly before brightening again. "Maybe you could teach me soccer sometime." I saw something flicker in Jason's expression at her earnestness. Not quite a smile, but a softening. It gave me hope. As Michael and I grew closer, we arranged more outings with the kids. Trips to the park, movies, pizza nights. Sophia bloomed in these gatherings, clearly hungry for family connection. Jason remained reserved, watchful. I interpreted his behavior as typical preteen attitude mixed with understandable wariness about another change in his life. When Michael proposed after a year of dating, I said yes without hesitation. We planned a small ceremony with just family and close friends. The night I told Jason about the engagement, I was unprepared for his reaction. "So he's going to be my stepdad?" he asked, his face carefully blank. "Yes, and we'll all live together. You'll have a sister too. Isn't that nice?" Jason was quiet for a long moment. "Does this mean I'll see Dad less?" "No, of course not. Your relationship with Dad won't change at all." He nodded but said nothing more. I should have probed deeper, should have created space for him to express his true feelings. Instead, I was so caught up in my own happiness, in the promise of a second chance at a complete family, that I chose to believe his silence meant acceptance. The wedding was beautiful, but looking back at the photos now, I can see what I missed then. In every picture, Jason stands slightly apart, his smile never reaching his eyes. Sophia, by contrast, looks radiant, holding tightly to my hand in several shots. We moved into a new house, one that would be ours rather than mine or Michael's. In the chaos of blending households, I missed the warning signs of what was happening. How Sophia's room quickly filled with new decorations and special touches, while Jason's remained a basic space with just his old furniture. How family meals began to centre around Sophia's preferences, rather than being balanced between the children. How I began attending all of Sophia's events, while finding excuses to miss Jason's soccer games when they conflicted with anything related to her. Looking back now, I can see exactly when and how the pattern began. But at the time, I was blind to the slow transformation happening within our family and within my heart. 6 months into our marriage, Michael and I settled into a routine that from the outside probably looked like a happy blended family success story. Our new house in the suburbs had enough space for everyone, including a backyard where the kids could play. Michael's architectural firm was thriving, and I had been promoted to lead teacher at my school. We had family dinners most nights and weekend outings to museums, parks, or movies. But beneath this perfect surface, an unhealthy dynamic was taking root. Without fully realizing it, I had begun to see Sophia as a second chance to heal my own childhood wounds. Here was a little girl who had lost her mother just as I had, albeit through death rather than abandonment. Something in me resonated deeply with her situation, and an unconscious mission formed in my heart. I would make sure Sophia never felt the pain of maternal absence the way I had. It started with small things. When decorating the children's rooms, I spent hours finding the perfect bedding curtains and accessories for Sophia's space, consulting her on every detail. For Jason's room, I bought basic items without much thought, assuming that as a boy he wouldn't care much about decor. When he mentioned wanting to paint his walls blue instead of the beige they remained, I told him we'd get to it, eventually. When Sophia mentioned an interest in learning piano, I immediately researched teachers and signed her up for weekly lessons, rearranging our family schedule to accommodate them. When Jason asked to join a competitive soccer team that would have games on weekends, I hesitated, saying we needed to think about the time commitment. I began to photograph and celebrate Sophia's every achievement, no matter how small. Her first successful piano recital warranted dinner at her favorite restaurant. Her good grades received effusive praise and rewards. Meanwhile, Jason's consistent A's in math and science were met with a simple, good job, and his winning goal at a soccer game with, "That's nice, honey." Family conversations started revolving around Sophia's interests and activities. "Sophia, tell everyone about your art project," I would prompt during dinner. "Sophia has her recital this weekend, so we'll all be attending," I would announce, not even asking if Jason had plans or preferences. All the while I was blind to the growing imbalance. In my mind, I was simply being a good stepmother, making sure Sophia felt fully integrated into our family. I didn't recognize how my behavior was affecting Jason, who became increasingly quiet at home, retreating to his room after dinner and speaking only when directly addressed. Michael noticed before I did. One evening, after the kids were in bed, he gently broached the subject. "I've been thinking about Jason," he said carefully. "Does he seem a bit withdrawn to you lately?" "He's almost 11, I responded dismissively. "That's normal preteen behavior. Boys that age start getting quieter." "Maybe," Michael said, "but I wonder if he might be feeling a bit overlooked." "What do you mean?" I asked, immediately defensive. "Well, we talk a lot about Sophia's activities, but not so much about Jason's. And I've noticed you've missed his last few soccer games." "I had parent conferences," I said, which was true for one of the games. The others I had missed for less important reasons, a sale at Sophia's favourite clothing store, helping her practice piano, simply being too tired. "I know you're busy," Michael said, treading carefully. "I just think we should make sure Jason knows he's just as important as Sophia in our family." His words stung, because on some level I knew he was right, but rather than examine my behaviour, I deflected. "Jason knows I love him. He's my son, and he has his dad too, which Sophia doesn't have with her mum. It's different." Michael didn't press further that night, but I see now he was trying to alert me to a problem I refused to acknowledge. The first major incident that should have been my wake-up call came when Jason's school held an awards ceremony where he was receiving recognition for a science project. It happened to fall on the same evening as Sophia's dance recital. Without much deliberation, I told Jason that Michael would attend his ceremony while I went to Sophia's recital. "But Mom, you're the one who helped me with the research." Jason said, his disappointment evident. "Dad won't understand what the project is about." "I'm sorry, Jason, but Sophia needs me at her first big performance. She's nervous, and Michael has to record it for her grandparents. You understand, right?" He didn't argue further, just nodded and walked away. At the time, I interpreted his reaction as maturity. Now I recognize it as resignation. That night, I sat proudly in the audience watching Sophia dance, taking pictures, and feeling emotional about how lucky I was to be in her life. Meanwhile, across town, Jason accepted an award with only his stepfather present, his own mother having chosen another child's activity over his achievement. When we returned home, Jason was already in his room with the door closed. The certificate from the ceremony was on the kitchen counter without any fanfare. When I knocked on his door to congratulate him, he responded with a flat "thanks" and didn't open the door. Typical preteen attitude, I told myself, growing frustrated with what I perceived as his moodiness. He's making me feel guilty when I'm just trying to be fair to both children. But I wasn't being fair. I was unconsciously recreating my own trauma, casting Sophia in the role of myself as the wounded child who needed saving, while Jason had unwittingly been assigned the role of the person who could be taken for granted, who would always be there regardless of how he was treated. Just as I had once believed my mother would always be there, until she wasn't. This dynamic continued and deepened over the next few months. Jason withdrew further into himself while I focused more intently on Sophia, creating a toxic cycle The more Jason pulled away, the more I felt rejected and turned towards Sophia's open affection. The more I favored Sophia, the more Jason retreated. I was setting in motion a pattern that would eventually shatter our family, all while believing I was finally healing my own childhood wounds. By the time we reached the 2-year mark of our marriage, the favoritism had become entrenched in our daily life. Jason, now 12, had become virtually invisible in our household, a ghost who moved silently from his room to school and back, interacting as little as possible with the rest of us. Sophia at 10 was thriving with the constant attention, but beginning to show signs of discomfort with the imbalance, occasionally asking why Jason didn't join us for family movie nights, or why I didn't attend his school events. Jason prefers to be alone, I would tell her, and he has his father to go to his activities. These explanations felt hollow even as I offered them, but I pushed away my discomfort. The summer before Jason turned 13, we planned a family vacation to Disney World, a trip I presented as a special treat for everyone. In reality, the itinerary I created was heavily skewed towards Sophia's interests, with princess character breakfasts, shows she wanted to see, and rides she preferred. When Jason expressed interest in the Star Wars section of the park, I allocated just a few hours there on our last day. The trip was a disaster from the start. Jason retreated into sullen silence, barely speaking during meals, and keeping his eyes glued to his phone whenever possible. When I confiscated it after a particularly tense dinner, claiming he was being rude, he exploded. "Why did you even bring me?" he shouted, drawing stares from nearby tables. "This whole trip is about Sophia anyway." "That's not true." I insisted, though we both knew it was. "And keep your voice down. You're embarrassing all of us." "I don't care," he said, his voice breaking. "I wish I had gone to Dad's for the summer instead." Michael, witnessing this exchange, tried to mediate. "Jason, we wanted you here because you're part of this family. How about tomorrow we split up and you and I check out more of the Star Wars area while Veronica and Sophia do their thing?" It was a sensible suggestion, but I interrupted before Jason could respond. "We came on this vacation to spend time together as a family," I said firmly, "not to split up." The irony of my statement when I had already effectively split the family into favored and unfavored children was lost on me at the time. That night, Michael confronted me in our hotel room. "Veronica, this can't continue. Did you hear yourself at dinner? Did you see the look on Jason's face? He's being dramatic?" I defended, testing boundaries like all teenagers do. "No," Michael said firmly. "He's hurting, and from what I'm seeing, he has good reason to be." His words ignited my anger. "You don't understand. Jason has always been moody even before you knew us. He's just like his father." "I think there's more to it," Michael persisted. "Have you noticed how everything on this trip revolves around what Sophia wants to do? Have you noticed how you light up when she enters a room, but barely acknowledge when Jason does? That's ridiculous." I snapped, though. A small voice inside recognized the truth in his observation. The rest of the vacation continued in strained silence, with Jason participating minimally in activities and me growing increasingly frustrated with what I saw as his attempt to ruin our family time. When we returned home, things went from bad to worse. Jason's grades began slipping from his usual A's and B's to C's and D's. The school counselor called, expressing concern about his increasing isolation from peers and disengagement in classes. "Has there been any change at home that might be affecting Jason?" she asked during our conference. "Nothing significant," I said, conveniently forgetting the entire restructuring of his family life over the past 2 years. "He's just going through a phase." The counselor looked skeptical. "Jason mentioned feeling like he doesn't really belong at home anymore. That's concerning language that could indicate depression." I bristled at the implication that our home environment might be contributing to mental health issues. I think that's an overreaction. All teenagers feel misunderstood sometimes. As I left the meeting, I felt a mix of indignation and unease. Deep down, I knew something was wrong, but acknowledging it would mean facing my own role in creating the situation. A few weeks later, Jason made his first direct attempt to talk to me about the problem. I was helping Sophia with a school project in the dining room when he approached, standing awkwardly in the doorway. "Mom, can we talk alone?" Something in his serious tone made me pay attention. "Sure. Sophia, why don't you take a break? We'll finish this later." Once Sophia had left, Jason sat across from me, his eyes fixed on the table. "Do you even want me here anymore?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The question caught me off guard. "What? Of course I do. You're my son." "It doesn't feel like it," he said, Everything is about Sophia now. It's like I'm just in the way. Instead of listening, really listening to what he was telling me, I became defensive. That's not fair, Jason. Sophia lost her mother. She needs extra attention and support. And what about me? He countered, his voice rising slightly. I lost my family too. Dad moved out, you married Michael, everything changed. But it's like you don't even see me anymore. That's not true, I insisted. You're being selfish. Sophia is younger and needs more guidance. I'm your actual kid, he said, pain evident in every word. But it feels like you wish I wasn't. Something in me snapped at his accusation. Well, sometimes you make it very difficult to be your mother, I retorted. At least Sophia appreciates what I do for this family. The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I had crossed a terrible line. Jason's face went completely blank, a defense mechanism I recognized from my own childhood. He stood up without another word and walked back to his room. I sat frozen, horrified at what I had said, but too proud and defensive to go after him and apologize. Later that evening, Michael found me crying in our bedroom. What happened? He asked. Through tears, I recounted the conversation. Michael listened without interrupting, his expression growing increasingly troubled. Veronica, he said finally, do you hear yourself? Do you understand what you're doing to your son? I didn't mean what I said, I insisted. I was just frustrated. This isn't about one comment, Michael said. It's about a pattern that's been developing since we became a family. You're recreating with Jason what your mother did to you. His words hit me like a physical blow. That's not true. I would never abandon my child. There are many ways to abandon someone, Michael said quietly. Physical presence isn't the only one that matters. I refused to continue the conversation, turning away from both his concerns and my own growing realization that something was very wrong in how I was parenting my son. Instead of facing the truth, I retreated deeper into denial, telling myself that Jason was just being a difficult teenager and that things would eventually improve on their own. It was easier than confronting the painful possibility that I was causing my child the very hurt I had sworn never to inflict. The final breakdown of our family began, ironically, with a birthday. Jason was turning 14, a milestone that should have been celebrated with care and attention. Instead, caught up in planning Sophia's dance recital the following week, I approached his special day with distracted, minimal effort. For breakfast, I made pancakes, forgetting that over the past year, his preference had changed to waffles. For dinner, I ordered pizza, but not from the artisan place he had mentioned wanting to try, just the chain restaurant we always used. When it came to cake, I picked up a chocolate one from the grocery store, forgetting that his favorite was now red velvet. Each disappointment registered on his face with a flicker before the now familiar blank expression returned. Each time I failed to notice or correct my mistake. Sorry it's not more exciting this year, I said as we sat around the table after an awkward dinner. We've just been so busy with Sophia's recital preparations. Michael shot me a warning look that I ignored. It's fine, Jason said flatly. Can I be excused? But you haven't opened your presents yet, I protested. Later maybe, he said, already standing to leave. Jason? I said, my frustration mounting at what I perceived as ungrateful behavior. We made an effort here. The least you could do is pretend to appreciate it. Michael intervened. Let's all take a breath. Jason, why don't you take some time for yourself and we can do presents whenever you're ready. After Jason left, Michael confronted me in the kitchen. Do you hear yourself? We've been so busy with Sophia's recital. Today is his birthday, Veronica. The one day that should be entirely about him. I'm trying, I said defensively, but he makes everything so difficult with his attitude. His attitude is a response to feeling overlooked and unloved, Michael said bluntly. I've watched this happen for 2 years now and it's getting worse. If you don't address it soon, you're going to lose him completely. I dismissed Michael's warning, believing that the bond between mother and child was unbreakable regardless of temporary tensions. I was wrong. 3 days after his birthday, Jason borrowed my tablet to research a school project since his laptop was being repaired. I didn't think twice about lending it to him. I should have remembered that my text messages synced to the tablet. That evening, he appeared in the doorway of the living room where Sophia and I were planning her recital outfit. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed. Jason, what's wrong? I asked immediately, concerned by his appearance. Without a word, he handed me my tablet open to a text conversation with my best friend Carla from 2 weeks earlier. There in black and white were words I had carelessly typed. Sophia's recital is the same weekend as Jason's birthday. Honestly, sometimes I think she's the daughter I always wanted. She's so much easier to love. My stomach dropped as I read my own thoughtless words. Jason, I didn't mean... Save it. He interrupted, his voice eerily calm. I already called Dad. He's coming to pick me up. What? No, we need to talk about this, I said, panic rising. We've talked enough, he said. Or actually, we haven't talked at all, have we? You've been too busy with your new favorite child. Sophia, witnessing this exchange, began to cry. Jason, please don't go. It's not my fault. For the first time in months, Jason's expression softened as he looked at his stepsister. I know it's not your fault, Sophia. It's not about you. Then he turned back to me, his eyes hardening again. I already packed a bag. Dad will be here in 20 minutes. You can't just leave, I said, following him as he walked back to his room. I'm your mother. This is your home. He stopped and turned to face me. Are you? Is it because for the past 2 years it hasn't felt that way at all? Michael arrived home just as Brian pulled up outside. Confusion and tension filled the house as Jason dragged his suitcase to the door. Jason, please, I begged, tears streaming down my face. Whatever you read, it was taken out of context. I was just venting. You know I love you. Do I? He asked, pausing at the door. Because from where I stand, you abandoned me a long time ago, Mom. You're just like your mother after all. His words struck with the precision of a surgeon's knife, cutting straight to my deepest fear. I physically recoiled as if I'd been slapped. Brian, standing in the doorway, looked between us with concern. Jason, get in the car. We'll sort this out later, when everyone's calmer. There's nothing to sort out, Jason said. I'm not coming back. I want to live with Dad full time. As he walked out the door, the full magnitude of what was happening finally broke through my denial. My son was leaving, believing himself unloved and unwanted, and the worst part was that I had given him every reason to feel that way. In the days that followed, I cycled through emotions, anger at Jason for overreacting, defensiveness about my parenting, and finally, painfully, the beginning of honest self-reflection. My calls and texts to Jason went unanswered. Brian agreed to meet me for coffee to discuss the situation. He's really hurt Veronica, Brian said simply, and from what he's told me, he has reason to be. It was one thoughtless text. I argued weakly. Brian shook his head. It's not one text. It's 2 years of feeling replaced and forgotten. 2 years of watching you create a new family where he feels like an outsider. That's not what happened, I insisted. But even as I spoke the words, I knew they weren't true. Jason says he's been telling you how he feels for months, but you dismissed him, Brian continued. Is that true? The memory of Jason at the dining room table asking if I even wanted him around anymore flashed in my mind. The conversation after his birthday, the dozens of small moments when he had tried to connect, and I had been too busy with Sophia to notice. For the first time, I couldn't maintain my defensive position. I didn't see what was happening. I admitted, my voice breaking. I didn't want to see it. At home, things were falling apart on another front. Sophia had become withdrawn and guilty, blaming herself for the family breakdown, despite our assurances that it wasn't her fault. Michael was both supportive and firm, making it clear that while he would help me through this crisis, he expected me to take responsibility and make changes. I love you, he told me one night as we sat on the couch, me staring blankly at a family photo taken in happier times. But I need to be honest. If you don't address what's happening, if you don't get help to understand why you recreated your childhood trauma with Jason, I can't stay. I won't let Sophia grow up in a home where this kind of emotional neglect is normalized. His ultimatum, delivered with love but absolute seriousness, was my final wake-up call. I had already lost my son. Now I was at risk of losing my husband and stepdaughter too. The pattern of abandonment would continue, only this time I would be the cause rather than the victim. That night, I had a moment of horrific clarity, seeing myself not as the wounded child of my narrative, but as the mother who walked away. In trying so hard not to be my mother, I had become exactly like her in a different form. The realization brought me to my knees literally as I collapsed on our bedroom floor, sobbing with a grief and shame so profound it felt physical. It was in that moment of complete breakdown that I finally became willing to truly see what I had done and seek the help I desperately needed. The journey back from rock bottom began with a phone call to a therapist. I still remember sitting in my car in the parking lot outside her office before our first session, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, terrified of facing the truth about myself and my parenting. Dr. Patterson was in her 60s, with silver hair and a direct gaze that seemed to look straight through my defenses. In our first session, I tried to present myself as the victim, explaining how Jason had overreacted to one careless text message. "It sounds like there might be more to the story," she said gently. "Tell me about your relationship with Jason over the past few years." As I began talking about our blended family, about Sophia's need for maternal guidance after losing her mother, about Jason's difficult phase, Dr. Patterson listened without judgment. But she also didn't let me hide behind justifications. "What you're describing," she said after I had talked myself in circles for nearly 30 minutes, "sounds like a pattern of emotional neglect toward your son that coincided with your remarriage. Would you be willing to explore why that might have happened?" Her words stung with their accuracy. In our next sessions, we delved into my childhood, my mother's abandonment, and how those early wounds had shaped my adult relationships. Dr. Patterson introduced me to the concept of repetition compulsion, the psychological tendency to recreate traumatic situations in an unconscious attempt to gain mastery over them. When you married Michael and became a stepmother to Sophia, you unconsciously identified with her as the abandoned child, Dr. Patterson explained. In trying to save her from experiencing what you experienced, you cast Jason in the role of the person who could be taken for granted, who didn't need the same level of attention and care. "But I love Jason," I protested tearfully. "He's my son. Love and our unconscious patterns don't always align," she said kindly. "You can love your son deeply and still recreate harmful dynamics if you haven't healed your own wounds first." Over weeks of intensive therapy, I began to understand how my unresolved trauma had warped my perception and behavior. I had been so focused on not abandoning my children physically, on not walking away as my mother had done, that I failed to recognize the emotional abandonment I was inflicting on Jason. Meanwhile, despite multiple attempts to contact him, Jason maintained his distance. He agreed to allow Brian to forward emails from me, but wouldn't respond directly. I wrote to him daily at first, pouring out apologies and declarations of love, that looking back was still more about assuaging my guilt than truly acknowledging his pain. Dr. Patterson helped me see this too. "Your apologies are still centered on your feelings, your intentions, your pain," she pointed out after reading one of my drafts. "Try writing from a place that centers Jason's experience." Gradually, my emails changed from "I never meant to hurt you" and "I was just trying to be a good stepmother" to "I understand now how my actions made you feel unwanted in your own home," and "You deserved a mother who could see and value you fully, and I failed to be that mother." For 8 long months, my messages went unanswered. During this time, I also worked on my relationship with Sophia, who had developed her own anxieties in the wake of our family breakdown. With guidance from Dr. Patterson, Michael and I established more balanced parenting practices and healthier boundaries. I learned to be present with Sophia without making her the center of my emotional world, which ironically allowed her to relax and develop more independence. Michael remained my steadfast support through this process, though our marriage required its own healing. "I enabled this too," he admitted during a joint therapy session. "I saw what was happening with Jason and didn't intervene strongly enough." Slowly, painfully, we rebuilt our family dynamic, always with the awareness of the missing piece that was Jason. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday evening, 9 months after he had left, a text appeared on my phone. "I read your emails. Dad thinks we should talk. I'm not ready to see you, but maybe we could start with more texts." I stared at the message through tears, showing it to Michael, who hugged me tightly. "It's a start," he said, "a small opening." Our text exchanges began cautiously. Jason set clear boundaries, stating he wasn't ready to discuss returning home and didn't want false promises. I respected his terms completely, grateful for any connection he was willing to establish. After a month of increasingly open text conversations, Jason agreed to meet in person with the condition that Brian would be present. We met at a neutral location, a park where Jason had played soccer as a child. Seeing him in person for the first time in 10 months was overwhelming. He had grown taller, his face more angular, less boyish. He stood slightly behind his father, much as Sophia had once stood behind Michael when I first met them, a parallel that wasn't lost on me. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Jason nodded but said nothing. With Brian facilitating, we sat at a picnic table. The conversation was halting, at first awkward with the weight of all that had happened. "I want you to know that I'm in therapy," I told him. "I'm working to understand why I did what I did, but that doesn't excuse it. Nothing excuses how I made you feel unwanted in your own home." Jason studied me for a long moment. "Dad says you've changed, that you understand now." "I'm trying to," I said honestly. "I understand more than I did, but it's an ongoing process." "You really hurt me," he said suddenly, his voice cracking slightly. "Not just with that text, but every day in 100 small ways you showed me I wasn't important anymore." For the first time, instead of becoming defensive or trying to explain away my actions, I simply listened. I listened as my son detailed the pain I had caused him, from missed soccer games, to forgotten preferences, to conversations that revolved around Sophia while ignoring his contributions. "The worst part," he said, his composure finally breaking, "was that you didn't even seem to notice. It was like I became invisible, but you couldn't see that I was disappearing." "I see you now, Jason," I said, tears streaming down my face. "I see the hurt I caused, and I'm so deeply sorry. Not just for the big moments, but for all the small daily ways I failed you." He didn't offer forgiveness that day. It would have been premature and unearned. But he did agree to another meeting the following week, this time without Brian. That began the slow, painful process of rebuilding trust between us. Progress wasn't linear. There were setbacks, moments when old patterns threatened to re-emerge, times when Jason's anger resurfaced and my defensiveness flared in response. But with continued therapy and unwavering commitment to change, small steps forward accumulated. 6 months after our first meeting at the park, Jason agreed to spend an afternoon at our house. It was awkward and tense, but also marked by moments of genuine connection, particularly between Jason and Sophia, who had always been innocent in the family dysfunction. "I missed you," she told him simply, showing him her newest art projects. "I missed you too, kiddo," he replied, and something in my heart both broke and mended at the same time, seeing the sibling bond that had survived despite my mistakes. Today, nearly 2 years since that terrible night when Jason walked out, we are still healing. He lives primarily with Brian, but spends every other weekend and one dinner night each week with us. Our relationship is different than it was before, more honest in many ways, though the easy closeness of his early childhood remains a casualty of my failures. The deepest lesson I've learned through this journey is that healing isn't about erasing the pain or pretending wounds never existed. It's about facing those wounds directly, understanding their impact, and committing to break the cycle rather than perpetuating it. My mother's abandonment shaped me, but it doesn't have to define my relationships with my children. I nearly lost my son by trying to fix my past through Sophia instead of healing it properly through self-awareness and growth. Now I understand that our children aren't vessels for our unresolved issues or replacements for what we lost. They are whole separate people, deserving of love, that sees them clearly for who they are, not who we need them to be. Have you ever found yourself repeating patterns from your childhood, even when you swore you'd never do so? Or have you had to rebuild trust with someone you hurt? Share your story in the comments below. And if you found value in hearing my journey, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share with someone who might be struggling with their own family dynamics. Breaking generational cycles of pain takes courage, but it's the most important work we can do. Thank you for witnessing my story.